Welcome to the All Inclusive Podcast, a podcast that delves into the world of inclusion from accessibility all the way through to diversity.
Maria, thank you for joining us this afternoon. I just thought, could you give us who you are and the potted history of how you got to this informed Adaptista?
Adaptista, my name's Maria O Sullivan-Abeyratne, and I'm the founder of Adaptista with my husband John, who is my co-founder. And Adaptista is an inclusive marketplace, and we're just actually started working on our own line of inclusive clothing as well. And we are trying to change the way disability is perceived within the fashion industry, because at the moment there's a huge gap between adaptive clothing and the kind of mainstream fashion and how people are represented.
I think the first step in anything in inclusion, the first step's always perceptions. It doesn't matter what type of industry it is, it's always perceptions.
Yeah, it's representation is so important, and you know we focus on specifically doing really beautiful imagery, and we try to make it feel we would describe as like a high-end marketplace, but without that added cost, for people with disabilities who may be on a lower income. We both know that it's always harder for people as well, who are disabled to find employment. It's a big challenge for people. Massive. So we want to have, everybody have that experience of going to a Net-a-Porter or a Farfetch or these beautiful sites and be able to find something that works for them, and be a trusted place that they know that they're going to come and find something that will work for them or find a solution. And not only them, but also something for their families as well. So, there shouldn't be a separation between adaptive clothing and mainstream clothing. And we're trying to prove that by showing that we're a marketplace that welcomes everybody.
It's interesting how you touched on, finding a job in recruitment. In one of the last podcasts I did, it's about it should be the norm. Like dyslexics should be recognized for being dyslexic and have their skills recognized, and so should people with like Asperger's and the likes of that be recognized for their specific skill set. And it's the same in your industry. It should just be recognized. It should just be it should be everywhere. But it's, as we said in the beginning, it's the start of the change to get everybody to adapt, right? See what I did?
I like it. It's got a long way to go. It's got a long way to go, but it's definitely better, and it's becoming less tokenism and more actual meaningful change. Like I've seen a lot of the fashion brands are starting to hire inclusively now, which is amazing. And the more that people are integrated, so where people with disabilities are working within the fashion industry, then their colleagues are going to see the day-to-day things the challenges that they run into, and that slowly grows the kind of awareness. So it's great. It's starting to change, and it will change. Hopefully it'll keep changing.
Absolutely. And if I remember back to the early days of Recite, it was a lot of people were doing things around disability for the tokenism, felt like they should do, and it was a tick box exercise. And the field has vastly changed now, where you talk to people in organizations that's got experience of the things you're talking about, and it's a passion for them. So hopefully your industry will adapt and change as well, and you will be the spearhead of it,
Hopefully, there's a lot of brands that they've done that tokenism thing, and they've had really beautiful imagery and beautiful clothing, but realistically the stuff that the clothing and the products that the models are wearing are not actually suitable for people with disabilities and doesn't make their life easier. And then the same thing is if you go into their stores, they're not accessible in a lot of cases. So they're changing. The awareness is growing. So all we can do is keep encouraging people through positive reinforcement and trying to do with a smile on our faces.
Absolutely, and it's a track that we take, because we always said that you can do short-term change by kind of using negative methods, but the right way to do it is through positivity, and
Yes.
encouragement. It's the carrot versus stick analogy. And if companies try and use the stick and kind of like shame people or push people with regards to using fear on legislation or anything like that, it tends to bring out tokenism. But if you do it in a positive way, it tends to attract people to the cause that believe in it and genuinely want to see change. So, hey, exciting times. But how did this all begin? Where did the idea come from? And what's the background to that?
Well, I grew up with there's members of my family who are disabled, but I also have my own disability as well. So I have ankylosing spondylitis, which is it's like an arthritis of the spine, and sadly uncurable. But when I was getting married in 2019, I was trying to find a dress that would suit, because I have a lot of difficulty with things like, zips being on the back. I can't zip them up, or I can't touch my toes. Yeah, a lot of mobility. And then if I turn the wrong way, all the muscles in my ribs or in my waist will go into spasm, or in my back. So I have to be very careful. And I couldn't find a wedding dress that was suitable for me, that was comfortable, that I could get in and out of if I wanted to change later on. And I found it really frustrating. And as well, I didn't want to have to go and, as a lot of the people who have disabilities will know, is that you're so limited to clothing that you not only have to buy a piece that you might like, but you also then have to get it tailored, or have a seamstress take up the length or whatever. So I found it really frustrating that there wasn't any options. So 1 week before the wedding, I finally found a dress. It cut it very fine. Finally found a dress, and then I said, right, enough is enough. I'm not going through this anymore. I'd also seen my sister has scoliosis, so I've seen her growing up and wearing her brace and not being able to find clothes that would fit and were kind of suitable. So that's where Adaptista started. So I actually went back to study fashion design, and that's
really
I did, yeah.
And your experience with the wedding dress, obviously, and years of having the similar issues, got you to go back and study.
Yes, yeah.
Oh,
so that's it. I was saying, right, there has to be a solution. There has to be an intelligent solution to this. And then as I did more and more research about fashion for people with disabilities, it became more and more glaringly obvious that there was a huge gap in the market. There was like nothing. There's nothing being catered for. You actually certain types of clothing you can't get at all. Certain people aren't being catered for, and especially teenagers. There was nothing cool or fun or anything a bit different to wear. It was all kind of geared at like elderly people. So the more people I spoke to, like I had people reaching out to me saying, please, can you make designers make shoes that fit over orthotic braces, the foot braces, and because we feel left out. All our friends are wearing all these beautiful shoes and we can't wear anything. So it was sad, because I had all these people speaking to me and saying all their issues, and then we wanted to try and find a solution for everybody. So that's why we decided to go down the route with Adaptista of bringing the brands on board, supporting all these small brands who can't be seen normally. It's very hard to find a lot of these adaptive brands, and not only have them seen, but also bring on brands that may not make clothing for people with disabilities or products, but that really want to learn about it and want to know how to be more inclusive. So we also support them with some training and guidance as well on their products and their businesses and how to make them more inclusive. So we're trying to cover a broad range of things with Adaptista, and we just want to be a trusted source where people can come and find us. And with your help with Recite Me.
Thank you very much. But yeah, I mean, your story is identical to mine. I got diagnosed with dyslexia at 22, so I wasn't young. And then working on the Disability Discrimination Act, because I was president of the student union at the time, I thought, well, surely somebody's thought of what we've eventually did, and it was a no. And then I was like, well, this is a massive gap in the market. There's like how many millions of people with dyslexia or visual impairment or an inclusion problem? Why isn't anybody catering towards this? And your story will be exactly the same. It's like, when you look at it, I genuinely thought somebody would have done this. And I went looking for it, expected to find somebody had started it 10 years beforehand, and there was nobody doing it. So that's sometimes how the best companies start, I find. And I would say that because I'm an optimist and it is my company. So, but when people say surely something like that, something as obvious as that hasn't been thought of. And I was like, the quote I always use, I was like, hey, it took the motoring industry about 85 years to figure out to turn the engine off at traffic lights saves petrol, and how many cars sit at traffic lights these days. So if it takes the motor industry 85 years to figure something like that out, so many glaringly busy, like obvious business ideas that seem simple, you think somebody should have done it, but haven't. And it'll be like that in your case. I bet there's so many people who have a need for this, but because it's deemed as kind of on the fringes, in the same way as dyslexia and Asperger's is on the neurodiverse scale, people just almost seem to overlook it for what could be a massive, market just waiting there to spend the money.
Well, especially now. So the latest figures from the government, they've now said that with all the new kind of neurodivergent diagnoses that have come through quarantine, it's now gone up from 15%, it's 22% now. So it's a massive jump up. It was always the 15%, we the 15. But yeah, it seems to be just rising and rising, and especially with long COVID as well, adding to that as well. But with people, I think a lot of people don't realize that, they might have so it's 1 in 4 have a disability. And a lot of people don't even know, or don't even acknowledge that they have a disability themselves. They're like, oh, I'm grand, I'm fine, don't have anything. Or they don't feel like they need to label themselves, which is also absolutely fine as well.
Absolutely.
But with I think things like TikTok and with social media throughout quarantine, it's really brought it to the forefront, and a lot of people feel like they're suddenly realizing that they're relating to these people who are their peers, and they're like, oh, I have that issue too. Oh, so that's how you deal with that. There's a lot of support has come through quarantine. And with the products, I know that when we were looking to find like different products, we couldn't find any that would support neurodivergence as well as Recite Me. We looked at so many options, and really it's the fact that it's embedded. Just want to add that your team are amazing.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah.
Our developers even said how organized and amazing they are. So yeah, what you've created is so vital. It's like such a core facet of what's needed within retail, especially, and to be honest. So I recommend everybody go and contact you.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I promise guests, I haven't paid any money for this plug. So thank you very much for it. But no, just like your story, I feel so passionate about it that, there's so much of the population can't get access to content because it's not structured in a way that's right for them, or at least it's not customized. But then there's the other area similar to what you were speaking about, is making people realize, to help people understand themselves as well. So it's almost like an education piece, is that I'm dyslexic, and I thought the best idea was to try and hide and beat the system, because I always thought I was dyslexic, instead of embracing it and going, this is what I am. This is, it's very common, and it has so many advantages in the world as well, and it's been a very, very interesting journey setting up the company, because it's also been a journey of almost self-discovery. of, so right, that's why I do that thing. I just thought because I was a little bit different, right? But this is every dyslexic trained, well, not every dyslexic, but a lot of dyslexics do this. So I think it's important, and I noticed how you touched with some people says they don't want to be labeled, and I almost say when somebody says, what is success to you for what you're trying to achieve? I says, probably success is when it doesn't need a label. It's just part of society anyway. It doesn't have to be a disabled label. It's just another facet of society, whether that's physically disabled, whether that's obviously you've got, I'm going to say this right, was it spondylosis?
Ankylosing spondylitis, very close. Yeah.
Very close. Yeah. So yeah, I often say to people, look, I'm a Geordie. Even if you're English, you'll probably not understand what I'm saying. So, but yeah, and it's to be normalized in society, but it's been almost kind of ignored for so many years, like hundreds of years, and potentially even thousands, that it needs a label of a disability for it to get to the forefront, and it needs to be a protected characteristic. But when you do your job over time, and I do our job over time, it just becomes a facet where it's just included anyway.
It should just be second nature. There shouldn't be that othering. I always say othering because that's really what it is. It's like us and them kind of thing. And sadly, especially with kids in school. I don't know if I mentioned, but I was in 2020, I was diagnosed with ADHD.
All right.
And yeah, when you were saying about looking back, going, oh, that's why I do that, or that's why. Suddenly everything kind of slotted into place, and I only found out through social media myself. I was like, oh, that looks very familiar. I behave like that sometimes.
It is interesting. My friend's just been diagnosed with ADHD, and it's often very closely linked to dyslexia as well. And I'm useless at tidying, and I have this kind of conversation. I'd love to call it a conversation, but it's often an argument that's saying I don't seem to have the skills to tidy. There's a lot of really complex stuff I can do that I find really easy that other people can't do. But the ordering, which is a common dyslexic thing, is one of the first tests you get tested on to be dyslexic is how your brain sorts with ordering. So it's normally counting numbers backwards and missing certain numbers out and the likes of that. But then it also there was a psychologist, I think, talking about ADHD, and they also explained how somebody with ADHD has trouble tidying, and it's all about kind of like, planning ahead, and your brain's not there because it's somewhere else. And I was like, whoa, there's so much of these facets where people probably have got, some, I don't even want to call it condition. I still don't know the right words to call these things, but facets of their life that could be helped if it was accepted into society, and you were just part of some grade that obviously would probably have these challenges, and it doesn't have to be labeled, and it doesn't have to always be medicated, because I'm a strong believer, there's varying levels of trying to find natural solutions first. But yeah, and it's so interesting how social media has done this, because it alerted it to me. And when my friend told us, oh, I've just been diagnosed with ADHD, I was thinking, bloody hell. I was like, if he's been diagnosed with ADHD, like, I definitely think I am, because we were like two peas in a pod at school.
They always say if one thing you need to get in each of your room, if you have an ADHD, you have a doom box in every room. The doom box is where you put everything that you just can't be bothered tidying, and you lump it into one box, and you go back and you sort it out at a later date. So there's I have about 17 doom boxes in my office, which I'm slightly dreading to go in and sort through, but
yeah, actually, when we were training for student union officers, and the National Union of Students always did absolutely fantastic, and I mean fantastic training. And one of the trainings they did about a clean office is put something in a box, and if you don't go looking for it in this box for 6 months, throw the box out without even looking at it. And
you can't do that with ADHD, because ADHD, you have a thing called, oh my God, it's a terrible recall is one of the things I have.
Yeah.
But there's object permanence, which is where you completely, if it's out of sight, you completely forget about, that you own it, you have it. Like, I've constantly food going off in the fridge. And yeah, I'm guilty of having a load of clothes in my wardrobe that I've completely forgotten about.
I think you're virtually diagnosing me with ADHD here, because I've always struggled. How do people keep the fridge clean? Like, how, I don't understand. I mean, bearing in mind, I've done tests for Mensa, and I can, I've done like tests where they said you're applicable to join Mensa, so the top 5%. And I'm like, but how come I can't keep a fridge clean? And I just don't understand how everybody tracks the dates, and it's
Well,
just like, it
there's
seems
another
such a
funny
complex thing.
one. Sorry, so I didn't mean to cut across you. There's another really funny one, which is apparently I'm okay, thankfully, with this, but brushing your teeth is seems to be a really, really big problem for people with ADHD as well. So if you always feel like, oh, I can't be arsed brushing my teeth in the morning or in the evening, that's actually apparently a really big part of ADHD, that it's just too overwhelming, and the sensory feeling of it is quite overwhelming as well. So
I haven't got that one there, thankfully enough. But I just found it so interesting. But I wonder where science will take us, because I'm coming across a lot of research on bacteria in the stomach and how it affects how the brain functions, and they believe that certain strains of bacteria are linked to helping, kind of like dampen down some of the autistic traits, maybe dyslexic and ADHD traits. And I think that's an exciting avenue for medicine, is that there could be a natural component to this, because there are finding it's either two ways with ADHD. It's either the diagnosis is so much better, or it's actually increasing a lot. And it's actually the same with autism. The amount of cases of autism is rising quite dramatically over the last 10 to 15 years.
it's similar with pain as well. So things like fibromyalgia, they're saying that very much linked to bacteria in the gut, and there's been treatments for I believe Crohn's disease, where they do fecal transplants now, which can be as they sound a little unusual, but they can be completely life-changing for people, and just totally giving people a whole new lease of life. And it's such a small thing that there's so many exciting things coming up. I'm part of a wonderful group called Women of Wearables, and it's a global community of women in tech that are creating really beautiful and clever things to do with like menopause and endometriosis. So yeah, there's so many. The science that's starting to pop up is fascinating. I'm really excited to know where you're going next. You have no doubt so many. I can see the cogs whirring in your eyes there when I said that.
Yeah, I think the ultimate aim for Recite is, when you have a need to access information, we want Recite to cover you at all levels. So it's almost like a safety net for people, because if I remember when I was at school, even though I used to get pretty good grades, I always had to copy from the guy that was sitting next to us, particularly in the early years at senior school. So we want to kind of be known for the section, not just the one, we've got quite a few bits of technology, but the technology that we do. So you're always taken care of. There's always a Recite product that will help you if you've got an information access need in any areas, whether that's, you're sitting at a bar, you can't understand something, or you're sitting on your computer and you're trying to read something, that's not just going online, but also an education piece as well. We want to really get behind what it means and how it affects people, and see if we can kind of help guide people earlier on in life, just with that positive influence. Because there was and I can't remember which prison, but there was quite a kind of frightening statistic where there was a company who went in and done dyslexia tests on people in prison, and it was 85% of people in the prison had dyslexia. And I can kind of understand it, because when I was younger, there was always like a kind of rebel against the system. I just didn't kind of really understand it, because it's not designed for dyslexics at all, and particularly people with Asperger's and the likes of that, you're told to like believe something, you're taught it, you've got to kind of revise what the teachers told you in your head, and then you've got to kind of just regurgitate it in an exam format. Where the dyslexic brain's more analytical, it tends to kind of try and, so I never really accepted the school system, but thought, I quite like me teachers. I don't like kind of the power that they yield over people for no reason, but I want to try and get on with them. So I always felt like I was not the most well-behaved student, but always got on very well with the teachers. But for other people, because the first system that they encounter in life is the school system, there's an immediate rejection of it. And that almost sets them up for life of just rejecting the system. And they often, everything's a system to a certain extent, and then they reject society and they try, and they go down a path that they end up, sadly, some of them in prison. So we just feel like we can play out part of kind of early intervention of like, it's okay if you like this. This is actually a good thing. It's the school system that's technically broke, but it's getting better. So.
Yeah, it's so important. The education from aspect is just so important. I had a dreadful time in school, and it's only now looking back that I was hyperactive. I was constantly fidgeting. I had a terrible memory, and it was only as I got older and the symptoms ease a little bit as you get older. And I actually went back, of all things, for someone with ADHD to study. I went back to study law.
Right.
Which,
That's a subject. Yeah,
I got through it, but it was a challenge. I'm not going to lie. But it's the like more acknowledgement of the neurodiverse conditions through school it would like be life-changing. Looking back, if I had known that back then, it would have been life-changing for me. The medication I take now for it has completely changed my life. And it's, if someone had that opportunity back then, wow, like there's so many other routes that people can go. But then you also have the side where, like, with neurodiversity comes creativity, I find, as well. And some
very
of the
true.
most incredibly creative and like, for example, entrepreneurs who create amazing things, like you've created Recite Me. So there's people that, because of these challenges, have found these really awesome solutions, or express themselves through beautiful art, or writing, or so there's so many. It's great it's really important to get it acknowledged through education, which I'm really excited that you're going to be doing. And then also to have the expression, and then so that's where we come in. We try and guide with expression. We're working on a project at the moment with different creatives to try and show people who are neurodiverse or people with disabilities about the creativity that's that they have, and to show that and represent them, and it's very exciting, very exciting.
It is very exciting. So what would you say your experience of school was like? Like, how
Dreadful.
like bad? And that, was that did you feel like the teachers, what was your relationship like with teachers in general? Was it good, or was it
My
frustrating?
relationship with teachers was okay. There was a couple of teachers that just didn't, the very stern, really wanted people to sit quiet. But putting someone who's hyperactive in a class, and if they're not interested in that subject, for me it was geography, and I hated my geography teacher. But if
It was the
all
one
of the
subject that nearly stopped me from choosing it as an option for GCSE. He says, well, Ross has got the ability, I don't feel like he has the attention, and I don't think he will. But I did it, and I done okay in the end, I think. But
Yay. Mine was so I love languages. I'm terrible at them, but I love them, and I love anything to do with history or English. And I would, because of ADHD, you can hyper focus and zone out on things. So I used to get really into it, and like I'd spend hours doing my homework, just to make sure it was right. And I'd go back. I'd be up till 1 o'clock in the morning, sometimes still doing my homework for the
really,
next day. Yeah, I because you lose track of time, you get really involved in something. But then there was classes where when I don't have the attention span.
I got on really well with the teachers actually, and I seem to have a bit of a license to kind of get away with more. But I think as a kid I figured out that I was hyperactive and I almost needed to express myself, and I would have much more like rope to do it if I got on well with the teacher as well. I think that was part of it.
Yes.
I didn't realize I was doing that at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always got kind of, Ross has the ability, he does not have the attention. He'd rather look out the window. But if you think about it as well, the people who have had the biggest effect on society, it tends to be the creatives. And a lot of them are deemed to be dyslexic, even from people like Winston Churchill to John Lennon.
Albert Einstein,
yeah. And the point I always try to make is you've got to be careful, because that if the school system from an early age convinces that person that they are not intelligent, they will probably not grow up to think that they can be a Shakespeare.
Yeah.
It is possible for somebody with Shakespeare's brain and the ability to do something like so beautiful could be dyslexic and not be able to write that well as well. But it's in there, and that's the education. It's almost encouraging schools to think like that and go, there's not a one size fits all.
I saw a very sad fact recently, and it was that by the age of 12, neurodiverse children have 20,000 more critical messages. They've received 20,000 more critical messages in their life than the average child. And it's just that continues on, affects their confidence, affects their, I suppose, bravery in some situations to try and lead in situations. And it's very sad that, that it's not being recognized, and it's always for ADHD especially, it was always seen as kind of a joke. Oh, everybody's a little bit ADHD, But I think it's changing. It's definitely, again, thanks to social media, I think it's changing. Social media has a big part to play in perceptions, for sure.
Because I think it's finally from the bottom up. It is often hard to kind of push something down the food chain, but you can, from the society itself expressing and showing how they are and how they function and how they operate, then it just spreads awareness. It's great. I mean, it's actually quite an exciting time, and it'd be interesting to see where society is in 30 years' time, when I believe it'll just be society. It won't be like just like the edge of society, how it's often treated now. When it's complete, it'll be very interesting to see how society is at that point.
Yeah, the othering will hopefully be gone, and our hope is that Adaptista won't be needed anymore. That's the dream, is that it will just be, it'll be an even playing field for everybody, and there shouldn't be any need for separation or to have to go find, certain marketplaces, for example, that just do adaptive clothing, that you'll be able to just go and buy something that will suit you in any store.
Yeah, and I agree with what you said, is that it's almost success is when people don't think you're doing something different.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good place to end. So I'd just like to thank you very much for your time. It's been very, very interesting, and I take my hats off to what you do, because I think you're changing your world in your own way, and I wish you all the success.
Thank you so much. And the same, my favorite, I never mention that my absolute favorite part of Recite Me is that you have beautiful, the speech section on it's really enjoyable to listen to. And in every language, it's warm and friendly. It's I just love, again, this isn't an ad, I'm not being paid for to promote Recite Me. I genuinely, it's fabulous. It's a great piece of tech, and you have an awesome team.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for your time, Maria, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thank you.